I think it's safe to say that most of us, at some point at least, wanted to try to hide something from our parents when we were kids. Maybe you got a not-so-good grade from school, or broke the living room lamp throwing the football in the house even after you were told to stop. And those of you who have siblings might be familiar with a situation where you were fighting over something stupid and accidentally one of you got hurt. Then you were making all kinds of deals so they wouldn't tell your parents what happened. But not many of us would go so far as 14-year-old Josh Phillips went, fearing his parents' reaction. To him, murder was an easier choice than facing his father's anger. Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, brief and bingeable true crime. My name is Joe, I'm the host, and I really appreciate you joining the show today. If you are brand new to this 10-Minute Murder podcast, I hope that by the end of it you enjoy what you hear, it's interesting to you, and you want to subscribe. Just find wherever you're listening right now and hit the subscribe button. Also connect with 10-Minute Murder on social media. Any place that you want to find 10-Minute Murder, just type it into the search bar and it'll pop right up. Or in the show notes of this episode, I'll leave links to where you can just easily click the link and it'll take you right to 10-Minute Murder on social media. Today's episode is very interesting, so I'm not going to delay. Let's get right to it. Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips was born in Allentown, Pennsylvania on March 17, 1984. He was the only child of Steve and Melissa Phillips, and there's not much to say about Josh's childhood because he was a lot like any other kid in the neighborhood. He was described as quiet and friendly. According to his teachers, Josh was popular with his peers and an average student who did not really stand out that much. But while Josh and his parents might have seemed like a happy little family from an outsider's point of view, the reality behind the scenes was quite different. In 1997, the Phillips family packed up their things and moved to the Sunshine State. Inside their new home in Jacksonville, Florida, Steve ruled with an iron fist. He was a violent drug addict and alcoholic who kept his wife and son in constant fear. Steve had made a list of rules for Josh and got angry if he brought other kids inside the house. For an unknown reason, Steve especially hated young girls. So much so that when Melissa was pregnant with Josh, she thought, please let it be a boy. Please let it be a boy. Not sure what Steve would have done if he had a daughter, but it's most likely better we don't know. Josh also later mentioned that he was afraid of his father. He said, quote, "If I did something wrong, he always had kind of a short temper, and sometimes I never knew what he'd do." But then Josh went on and did the one thing that his father hated the most. He brought a girl into the house. So across the street from the Phillips family lived an 8-year-old little girl, Maddie Clifton. And on November 3rd, 1998, Maddie had the audacity to go up and knock on Josh's door to ask if he could come outside to play baseball with her. Josh was not supposed to have friends over while his parents were not home, but he agreed to anyway. And as I'm sure you're already guessing, things went really wrong really fast. As the two were playing, Josh accidentally hit Maddie with the ball, causing her to bleed from somewhere around her eye. And of course, she screamed. The situation sent Josh into an instant panic mode. He freaked out, but wasn't necessarily worried about Maddie, but about himself. Josh didn't even want to think about what would happen to him if her parents, or especially his father, found out he had had a friend over while they were gone. So in that moment, Josh quickly made a decision that would destroy both his and Maddie's lives. Josh Phillips dragged the screaming Maddie inside the house and hit her with a baseball bat so she would shut up. Josh then hid Maddie under his waterbed as if he had now solved the problem. And I know if you're listening to this and you were born after a certain time, you have no idea what a waterbed is, but just imagine a giant water balloon, but you slept on it. Josh stuffed Maddie's body under that waterbed. Soon after, Steve and Melissa returned home, and Josh, after talking with them for a while, he went back to his room just to find out if Maddie was still alive. It seemed that Josh thought that there was no going back at this point, so he pulled out a knife and slit the girl's throat and stabbed her in the chest 7 times. And that sounds a little bit like overkill, but apparently Josh was so afraid of his father that he cut an 8-year-old's throat and repeatedly stabbed her rather than say, "Dad, I hit my friend with a baseball." Meanwhile, across the streets, Maddie's mother, Sheila Clifton, began to realize that her daughter still had not returned home. She called out for Maddie at around 6:30 p.m. for dinner, but she never came. Maddie's parents were completely unaware that their daughter had gone to Josh's house that day, and so, after the panic started to settle in, they reported her missing. For several days, the police, Maddie's family, and neighbors searched for the little girl, and so did Josh. So Josh participated in the search, returned to his home later in the evening, and went to sleep on the bed, which was on top of the very person everyone was looking for. Josh would later say that he was living in some kind of a fantasy world at this point, where he was able to convince himself that nothing had actually happened. But the thing is, even a defense mechanism like that can't erase the smell of a rotting body. The inevitable happened on November 10th, when Melissa went into her son's bedroom and looked around. She had smelled something strange before and wanted to find out where the smell was coming from. While doing so, Melissa noticed a wet stain on the floor. Thinking Josh's waterbed might be leaking, she removed a piece of the plywood at the front of the base and immediately saw 2 tiny legs sticking out. Horrified, Melissa ran to call the police. Josh was arrested later that day at his school, and within a few hours, he confessed. Josh told the detectives what happened and how he accidentally hurt Maddie and panicked. However, according to prosecutors, several details in Josh's story didn't quite add up. It was suggested that Josh actually had a sexual motive because Maddie was found without her pants and underwear. Josh explained that the girl's clothing had come off when he dragged her inside, but the prosecutors didn't believe that story based on the lack of sand on Maddie's body. However, the autopsy did not find any evidence of sexual assault. Josh Phillips' trial began on July 6, 1999, and lasted only 2 days. His attorney didn't call witnesses but introduced neurological scans taken from Josh's brain, which showed lesions in his frontal lobe, saying these could have explained his irrational panic and impaired judgment. In addition, Josh's defense told the jury about his problems at home and his fear of his father and how Maddie's murder had just been a desperate act of a scared boy. But in the end, the jury did not buy it. Jurors took just a little over 2 hours to return with a guilty verdict. Josh Phillips was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His young age saved him from the death penalty. Since then, Josh has been a model prisoner in the Taylor Annex. His father was killed in a car accident in 2000, and if Josh still blamed his father for his actions on that day, he might have felt a little bit of justice in that moment. During the years, Melissa has been seeking a new trial for her son, saying that his young age should have weighed more into his sentence. Such a sentence was later found unconstitutional in the Supreme Court of the United States of Miller v. Alabama in 2012. 4 years later, in 2016, Josh was granted a new sentencing hearing, and in November 2017, he was resentenced to life in prison, but this time with eligibility for resentencing again in 2023. The Florida Court of Appeals stated in December 2019 that Josh's sentence will be reviewed again and could be modified in 2023 based on, quote, demonstrated maturity and rehabilitation. Josh has expressed extreme remorse for his actions and wanted to apologize to Maddie's family in person, but the Cliftons do not have any desire to see or talk to their daughter's killer. To them, all that matters at this point is to keep the person responsible for Maddie's death behind bars forever. In 2023, Josh Phillips will be 39 years old. And here's the question: should he get a second chance in life? He definitely did not give that to Maddie, but is life imprisonment the right sentence for an abused 14-year-old? Maybe in 2023, we'll get the answer. That's today's 10-Minute Murder. Brief and bingeable true crime. Again, I'm Joe, the host, and I really appreciate you joining today. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, if this is the first time you're listening to this podcast, I hope you enjoyed it and you find the subscribe button wherever you're listening right now and subscribe to 10-Minute Murder. You won't miss any future episodes of the podcast. They'll automatically come to you when you open the app and go to listen to it. You can also connect with 10 Minute Murder on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Also TikTok, YouTube. All the links for that are in the show notes of this episode. But if you just go to the search bar within any of those platforms, type in 10 Minute Murder, and it's going to pop right up. Whichever way is the easiest for you, there you go. In the show notes of this episode, you'll also find a link if you're interested in t-shirts, cups, and stickers and things like that. Merchandise, just overall 10 Minute Murder merchandise. No pressure, but if you want some of that, there's a link there that you can find. And lastly, before you go, if you have friends, congratulations, I'm happy for you. But let them know about 10 Minute Murder. Now, let me be specific. As a true crime fan, I know that I have a certain group of friends that would absolutely be into hearing about a new true crime podcast that I've found. And on the other hand, I have another group of friends that would think I was a complete weirdo if I was trying to tell them all about this murder podcast. Now, you can tell both groups about it. It's going to be a risky move, but I would suggest the ones that you know are going to be into true crime. Let them know about 10 Minute Murder, and I really would appreciate it. Thank you for listening to 10 Minute Murder. Be safe and make good choices.